Stay tuned for the next edition of Zoom Landlord-Tenant Talk Radio. The opening topic, professional tenants, how to spot the red flags. Well, hello, everybody. Yes, another edition of Zoom Landlord-Tenant Talk Radio coming at you every Saturday at 3 p.m. Today will be a special show. We will only be doing our opening topic. We will not have a Zoom meeting today. We will pick that up next week, Saturday. So let's talk about the topic at hand, and that is professional tenants, how to spot the red flags. So what is a professional tenant? Well, that's a person who exploits landlords and tenant laws, delays evictions, and or manipulates the system for their personal gain. Now, scams can occur by tenants before they gain entrance into your property and after they gain entrance into your property. Okay, let's go over the first line of attack in terms of trying to weed out professional tenants. The first thing that you need to do is when seeing an applicant, you need to give them a rental leasing requirements notice. Now, this form is on my website at evict123.com. It's in the free form section. And this is a very valuable form because it stops tenants from bringing forth phony discrimination claims, because this form is going to inform the tenant what are the requirements necessary in order to become a tenant in your building. So, for example, and I'm going to share the screen with you, it must state that gross monthly income must be at least 3 times the rent. It also states that you're going to perform a credit check and that their credit score must be at least $700 or more. It tells them that you're going to go through their rental history and that they have to have at least 2 years of rental history. And it must show that there's been no evictions or any violations of the lease. It must also show that you are going to require that that tenant have at least 6 current rent payments that they've made to their landlord, their present landlord. It also will tell them that you're going to do a criminal background check. It also will tell them, for example, that you do welcome Section 8 applicants because you don't want to get into a situation where you're rejecting a Section 8, because we now know that that would be considered discrimination, at least in the state of California. So this is the first line of attack that you need to do in terms of trying to weed out professional tenants. Okay, so what are some of the requirements that you need to look for in order to spot red flags? And that is, you want to look for any incomplete or inconsistent information on their application. You want to look for any gaps in their rental history or unverifiable employment, or maybe that they move frequently. You want to look for any reluctance for them to provide references, especially from their previous landlords or employers. You want to talk about the fact that if they have an insistence on moving immediately, that's often a sign that they've been evicted. Also, when they want to pay you several months' rent up front, that can be a tactic in order to avoid you doing a proper credit check. You also want to look for any litigious history for these tenants. If there's any public records that show that they're involved in many lawsuits. Also, if they're overly knowledgeable about tenant rights, that also can be a sign that this is going to be a bad tenant. So these are the issues and the red flags that you should be trying to spot when you're first being introduced to that tenant.
I do not understand why there are gaps in your rental history. Also, why is the name on your driver's license different from the name you wrote on this application? It appears that you are one of those professional tenants.
Okay, let's move on with regard to the application process. The first thing you want to be sure is that the applicant that is in front of you actually has the same name that appears on his application. And that's why you want to ask him for his driver's license. and you definitely want to make a copy of that driver's license. If the applicant tells you that under California law, he doesn't have to show you his driver's license, he's actually correct. But then you can inform him that you'll never become a tenant in my building. Now, driver's license can be copied, can be counterfeited. So you can't just rely upon a driver's license. You also want to ask this applicant to show current utility bills, which will have, of course, the address where he alleges that he's currently renting. You also want to ask him for his cell phone bill. These are all documents that will be more difficult for him to fraudulently produce. And on that basis, you will know that there's, quote, no false identity issues with regard to this tenant. You can also ask for banking statements. Again, that'll list his name and his address, and it'll also show on this banking statement that he was making payments to his current landlord. Now, you want to make sure that the information that he put on his application is correct. Do not rely upon the phone number he listed for his employer. What you need to do is you need to do an internet check for the name of that employer and make sure that the phone number he supplied is actually the correct phone number. Because many times what they're going to do is they'll have a friend waiting at that phone and to indicate to you that, in fact, this person is a wonderful employee and has been there for several years. So do not rely upon the phone number for the employer that he put on his application. You do your own internet check to garner that number. Also, again, as I stated, you want to look for any gaps in his rental history. Obviously, he's going to tell you about the landlords where he never had a problem, but he's probably going to try to avoid those landlords that, in fact, he had problems with. So look for gaps in his rental history. Also, with regard to running a credit report, you don't want to rely upon any reports that the tenant has given to you. If the tenant gives you a report, a credit report, and he says this was just run, take that report and throw it into the closest garbage can. You're going to need to run your own credit report because it's so easy for people with Photoshop or whiteout to change the content of a credit report. So you need to run your own. Also, as I stated previously, you want to show proof that he made his last 6 months rent payments to his current landlord. You want to see proof of that because that will weed out all these tenants that are getting evicted who haven't paid rent in the last 6 months to 1 year to their current landlord, and now are going to try to do it to you. And also, you do want to do a civil lawsuit check. You want to see if this person is litigious. Obviously, if this person has sued his last 6 landlords, you certainly don't want that person in your building. Also, even if he has been sued by many different other companies, again, this is not the person that you want in your building. Lastly, if you've gone through the credit check, you've gone through his application and everything checks out, make sure you don't make the worst rookie mistake that you can ever make, and that is to accept a personal check on a move-in. The only way that you will allow him into your building is if he gives you cashier's check and maybe even a personal check. But again, he is not gaining entrance to your building unless those funds have cleared. Those funds must clear before you allow possession of the unit. So many times I have seen tenants come in on a fraudulent check or a counterfeit cashier's check, believe it or not, and these people are in possession. You can call the police, you can call the Treasury Department, you can call anybody you like, but the bottom line is you're going to have to do an eviction. And that, ladies and gentlemen, constitutes my discussion on a professional tenant, how to spot the red flags.